It's time to get buck wild.
Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick, where we are getting into part 15 of What If Daryl Died Instead of Merle. But before we get into this video, just want to say, smash the like button and hit that subscribe button so that way you can help make this channel bigger, better, and much more awesome with stories, reviews, and discussions for the future, and it will generally just help me out and just be very nice. Anyway, if you guys do that and get all that out of the way, we can get on with the story for today. So, we have just recapped and left off with Jesus, Aaron, Eric, Ezekiel, and Shiva all seeing and talking to Merle at the gates of the sanctuary after the whole deal in the last episode. And Merle wishes to know who all these people are, where they came from, and why they're stopping him from going just yet, and, you know, generally what is their whole deal, you know? Jesus apologizes and said they'll introduce themselves and say what's going on fully. Jesus introduced himself as Paul Rovia Jesus. You know the deal. Ezekiel introduces himself as King Ezekiel, per his character at the time, and Aaron and Eric introduce themselves. And then Jesus gets into his whole thing about that Negan wasn't lying about there being much more saviors, and that he meant what he said. They won the war, but the battle isn't over yet. And there is some good news. Good news is there's not a huge heck of a ton left of saviors left. They took care of the main threat with Negan and all the people in the sanctuary. Bad news, if they let it go, their town and all their communities that were under Negan's control also, or at least beginning to get like that, will all be in trouble. And they will help them. All the communities will help Merle and them take them down and possibly spare them if push comes to shove. But in return, they want many of the weapons, fuel, and whatever they got from their town Woodbury to be traded evenly among the communities and work out a fair negotiation between all of the towns and stuff. Merle thinks about this for a second and thinks, you know what? Fair deal. Let's do it. And Jesus is very happy to see Merle as like a upstanding, like, good leader, even though they just met. So as for the first satellite outpost and then the second, there really is absolutely no contest. The saviors are nothing. But Gracie's father, who we don't know the name of, same with Lizzie and Mika's father, I think, he gets to live. And as for Morales, he gets a certain visit from an old friend from the Atlanta camp and everything. Not expecting to see Merle Dixon here, along with a lot of familiar faces. And Morales is actually going to get to live. Now, why is that? Well, you see, this is getting into like season 6 territory at this point, kind of. So, with season 5's timeline territory getting into season 6's timeline territory for the way the story has gone and converged into this point of the tale, this means that Negan's savior development was still very early. And by extension, this means that Morales would have just probably just gotten into the saviors and would be barely used to it. So even if it was Merle, there's still a lot of Atlanta people alive who would sway him into being good again. So he gets to live. And everyone goes back to Woodbury and the trades are made, which is what I'm going to pay attention to in a second, but I want you guys to pay attention to all of what I'm going to be explaining, because it's a lot at once, and you guys are going to have to pay close attention to it. So with Merle and Andrea's relationship, they eventually have a kid. And for consistency and story's sake, I know I've done this with kids in my stories before, but I'm going to go off on a limb and say because of Daryl's sacrifice, Merle would want to name the kid Daryl Jr. to take after Daryl, because it makes the most sense. Like, come on. As for the Grimes family and Rick and Michonne and all that, that family arc is actually going to go the way it did. RJ's still going to be born, and yeah, Carl's alive, too. Keeps both eyes, and his relationship with Mika would finally become like a true, bona fide relationship. Then we get into a bunch of others. Tara and Alicia, Beth and Zach, Tyrese and Karen. I'm just going off of relationships that were there but are more developed. Bob and Sasha, along with Glenn and Maggie, Glenn being around for another repeat to actually be around for his eventual baby, Herschel. And I still think that they would name it Herschel, even though Herschel in this story is still alive. Because I think I've done that before, so why not? And here's a relationship I bet none of yous were expecting. Martinez and Clara. It was kind of just something I threw together, but honestly something that works. I've done Martinez and Lily together, so why not? Now, I would get into survivors, but we're going to push that aside. Because if I were to tell you all the survivors, that would make for a very, very long, episode. And I've done it before. I would have had to, literally pile them together so much you wouldn't be able to see the guys. Literally. It would have been a huge, gigantic photo collage. So I'm just going to leave you guys with the fact that all the communities have all their people alive still, and with Merle's group, only Dawn's group and Amanda died, and Gareth. So yeah. Speaking of communities, Merle, Andrea, and Michonne, per the agreement after the saviors were dealt with, hand out the weapons that Michonne crafted mainly, and all of them crafted, out to the communities and do a share between all the towns. And Deanna would get hooked into this from Alexandria via Aaron and Eric explaining. So, Deanna, Jesus, and Ezekiel would all be the main three that converge with this whole trade and agreement between communities. Gregory, he would be the leader, but even without Negan and Simon and a threat, he would still be a jerk and a scumbag, which is why Jesus would take up the main, trade between communities and the deal. As for Merle, he would say that this is all they're doing. What he gives the communities is all he wants to give. He's hoping that from this point on, his town can be left out of future problems, because the whole savior thing, that was Barrett just something that he really should have just went to Washington with them, and it just got into the Savior War in the first place. But all of them understand. Now I'm going to cover loose ends. Noah still has not gone back to his hometown yet, and this would be a little later in the canonical timeline than it was, because we're getting into season 6, but they go there, a small group from Woodbury, but it's under the wolves' control. It was rampaged by the wolves. And Merle is just exasperated at the fact that there are still groups out there who are just causing trouble to the world, but he really shouldn't be surprised. And then we get to the wolves invading Alexandria. Or should I say, try to invade Alexandria. Because with the weapons and supplies and everything that Alexandria has been given, they are more than prepared for this. A guard from Alexandria shoots a rocket at the truck that's driving straight towards the gates, blowing it up on contact. The wolves still try to invade, even with their little contingency here destroyed, but they just get utterly and completely blasted to kingdom come by every remnant of Alexandria that is there. So the problem is solved.
Right. Wrong!
Because we have still got the horde from the quarry not being properly dealt with. And this isn't the first time that I've done this with the horde there. And they slowly but surely start to make their way towards Alexandria. Luckily, it's not that hard of a problem to deal with because of the united groups and everything. The kingdom and Jesus in the hilltop are able to stop the horde and help out with everything they've been given. But it's not without consequence. We get casualties. Reg, Aiden, Nicholas, Ethan, Carter, and then we get to the Andersons. Pete and Ron are killed. Jesse and Sam are in trouble when the horde is almost died down thanks to the combined efforts. But Shiva manages to save them with no more casualties. But they did get through it pretty frickin' easy besides that. Meanwhile at Woodbury, Gabriel gets fully exonerated into the cause of Woodbury and becomes the town's official priest besides whoever would be there to do that. And keeps his sight, which is like the frickin' millionth time that I've done that. Anyway, Sadiq gets rescued by the likes of Aaron and Eric, following Spencer along with them, which is something I've done before too. Now, you pay attention to this. We are getting a huge time skip. 6 years, to be exact. I know. This is huge. This is a very big time skip after everything that I've just mentioned. But that's kind of just the way it has to be because of the saviors being dealt with in Season 5 territory and just the fact that there really isn't that much else to talk about because the saviors were the highlight of Seasons 7 through 9. So yeah, Yumiko's group gets saved by the communities, and Gregory and Jesus officially have the whole vote at Hilltop about who the true leader should be. But it's kind of one-sided, and Jesus would be fully the leader. And he would be more than enough to keep Gregory in check, so he's not going to hang Gregory. So Gregory is going to remain alive, unfortunately. But yeah, Jesus with his combat prowess and everything's more than enough to keep it in check. As for the bridge, even though Washington is destroyed, Jadis's group as well as Oceanside are not mentioned for very specific reasons. And just because Woodbury is out of the picture for now, all of the communities for the fair and everything like that are able to get the bridge built successfully, and Woodbury would only be brought into the equation if absolutely necessary. Other than that, they'd be just fine. They barely lost anyone besides the wolves, because the saviors were died down, like I said. Ken would remain alive, and Jesus, like I said, would be the full-on Hilltop leader. Now, we're getting into the big territory, probably the biggest part besides the saviors, the Whisperers for this story. And this is going to be the ultimate tipping point and turning point of the story. But because of everything that's happened, because of the saviors, the Whisperers being brought in now, how is it going to happen? And if and how and when they are brought in, how will the threat of them be vanquished? And how does it go into the future of what this story is going to become? Hashtag spinoff. And how is Woodbury going to be brought into the fold? Or can the communities fend the Whisperers off themselves? Find out next time, because that's where we're leaving things for the moment. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
Pray for mercy to come.